Hi, I'm Muir. Welcome back for another Tool Time Tuesday. In this video, we're going to be talking about our charcoal block and how to prepare it, specifically the soft charcoal block. Now, charcoal blocks are great because of the atmosphere that they create when you are trying to solder, particularly for gold or anything like that. And so there are a couple of things that you want to do to prepare this so that you can have it last much longer. Now, one of the favorite things that I have found is this book, 101 Bench Tips by Revere. This has a ton of tips in there, including tip number 23 on how to prepare your bench block. But that's what we're going to be talking about here, so let's take a look. So here I have a few different tools. First of all, I have a piece of paper down, and that's because this is going to be a little bit messy. And because it's messy, I'm also going to be wearing some gloves. So the first thing that I want to do though is I want to open up my charcoal block. We are going to be binding this with some wire. And in this case, I have steel binding wire. Now typically I would prefer to do this. See how dirty this is? I told you guys. Typically, I would do this with a much thinner wire, but I do not currently have any. So I've got some 20 gauge stainless steel binding wire that I'm going to be using. Now, I do have access to thinner wire. I just did not currently have any in my studio, but I will include links to those in the description of the video, so be sure to check that out. A lot of times I will use 24 or a 28 gauge, and you take it and you twist it and then you start to wind it around your charcoal block. Now the reason for binding this is because as you use this, it's going to begin to break down and eventually your block will crack. And by doing this binding, you're going to keep it together much longer, and so you have a longer life on this. The first thing I want to do is kind of create a groove. And see, I told you this is really dirty, so this is why I wanted to wear the gloves. But I've got a triangle file right here, and it doesn't matter what you use, but you want to just create kind of a little groove in here. And I'm going to come around, and I want to do this on all four sides. And I'm doing this at about the center point in my block. All right, like I said, it's very, very dirty. And so after this, I will take a file card and clean out my file as well, because we don't need to keep that in there. So now I have my four divots knocked into each of the corners. And what I want to do now is I'm going to pull out a length of wire, maybe. And I want this to come all the way around my block. I want to make sure we've got enough here. So this is a little longer than I need, and I'll probably end up cutting some of this off, and that's not a big deal. And because I don't want this to all unwind on me, take a second and poke that through. All right, so once I have my binding wire, and like I said, I've got far too much here, and typically I would fold this in half and twist this if it were a thinner wire, but 20 gauge is pretty thick, so I'm just going to leave this. So what I want to do is I'm going to lay this into the little grooves that I have just created. And I'm going to do that all the way around the block. And then we're going to get here to the side, and we're going to twist this. Okay, so it gets a little cumbersome. Now, I've got that secured. I'm going to trim these ends right here just to get them out of my way because they are a little bit in the way. There's charcoal dust going everywhere. All right. So another thing that I have, this is called a needle pusher. This is something that a surgeon would use in doing stitches or in surgery or something like that. But the thing that I like about it is like a locking hemostat. So really a hemostat would work as well. But the thing I like is that I can then click it, and now I can use this and help tighten everything up. So I want to twist this until this gets tight on my block. And then I can let this go. And the next thing I need to do is to tuck the ends of these wires because I certainly do not want them sticking out and poking me. So I'll just tuck those down and stick them into the edge of my block. Now another thing that I'm going to do is come here on the front side, and I'm just going to give a twist on the front of my wire, and I'll do the same thing here on the sides. And this is going to help really ensure that everything is nice and tight on this block, like so. Now that was step one. We now have our wire tight up against the block. Everything is held nice and tight, but we still need to prepare the block itself. We need to basically cure this. And by doing this, it's going to get this block ready to go and help prevent some of that cracking. It's going to release the tension that is currently in this block. And it is a very important step, one that I never knew about way before when I was getting started on this. I just jumped right in and started to use my block. So there's a few other things that you need to know. So let's go look at that. So now our block is ready to go. First thing we need to do is we need to cure this block. And to do this, we are going to heat this up. So I'm just going to take some time here and just really warm this block up. You'll hear some popping and cracking, and that's going to be normal. And I'm going to take my time and just do this nice and slow. By doing this, like I said, we are releasing the tension that's in the block. And I also saw that I just released some tension in my wire. So I will afterwards come back in and tighten this wire up again. And now I'm starting to hear some of that popping and cracking. And you can see how, you know, kind of when you put your heat in one area, you'll start to see that little bit of a red glow. And when we run our torch over it and we see that red glow, that's really how we know we've got a good warmth on that. Kind of taking that up to temperature a bit. Now I want to flip this over, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So you can see it does not take very much time at all, but it is definitely an important step in preparing your charcoal block for use. Now on this one, you are going to warm this up and then you'll just let it cool down on its own very, very slowly, and just let it cool completely before you use it on anything else. Like I said, go ahead and let that cool down. When that is done, I'm going to come back in with that hemostat or that pusher, and again I'm going to twist and tighten up this binding wire just to make sure that it's nice and tight. Now while this block cools down, I want to show you a couple things with this block. So this one's already been used a little bit. You can see I've carved into this. We're getting some grooves and bumps. This is going to be good for a very long time still. But let's say that you get all kinds of ripples and bumps and nasty surfaces. It's very, very easy to resurface this. You can just take this outside, rub it against another brick across. I do it on my sidewalk. You end up with a nice little black patch for a little bit, but I just run it in a figure 8, and then you come back to a flat level plane. Now another thing, so I want to show you really quickly, and I'm just trying to bring this up to temperature a little bit. It's going to be a little while because I have not used this block, so it's not very warm. But you see how it's all red and glowing, kind of our embers are just kind of sitting there smoldering. Now you don't ever want to leave your block smoldering. You always want to extinguish your block, but to do that, you just take a little sprayer and just give a really quick little mist, and that's enough. You just want to put out those embers because otherwise it's going to continue to burn. It's charcoal. So you always want to take the time to extinguish your block. Always get, never leave it glowing ever. And I, just for good measure, even if it's not glowing, I will still just take and spritz a little bit of water onto that to extinguish everything and make sure that I really have it put out. And that's going to help your block last much, much longer. So as you can see, it's a very, very, very fast process. It doesn't take much time at all, doesn't take much effort, and it doesn't require a lot of tools. And once you've got this ready to go, you should have a very long life of your charcoal block, obviously depending on what you're doing. Now you can see that I already carved some grooves into this, and that was because I used those grooves in the toggle bracelet for the Revere series that I am doing. So I'll link that video for you guys so you guys can see how I carved into this and how I use it. But you can also carve into it, and a lot of people will pour their molten silver or gold or whatever to make an ingot. So you don't have to have an ingot mold, you could easily use this as well. There's a lot of really great uses for the charcoal blocks. There are two varieties. There's a soft and there's a hard. The hard, it has a more compressed surface, so it's much heavier, much more dense than the soft charcoal blocks. They will last a bit longer. They're harder to carve. So they both have their uses and their purposes. I have multiples of each one here in my studio. So I would highly suggest that you get some. They're under $20. I want to say they're like in the $15 to $16 range at this moment. So they're really not that inexpensive, or they're not that expensive. They're quite inexpensive actually. So it's a great tool that you are going to want for your studio. And again, I'll include links down in the description where you can get some of those. As always, you guys, if you like the video, if you find them helpful, please give me a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe and, share the channel. Share this so that other people can have it as well. So thanks so much for joining me for Tool Time Tuesday. I'll see you guys later this weekend for Weekend Jewelry School.